Hi everyone, and welcome to this recorded session for application processes for the postgraduate research or doctoral degrees. Within this session, we'll cover the routes into the research degrees, the application process, including what documents you'll need to apply, and the research proposal. So this slide covers the traditional application process, and it is the most common route into a doctoral degree, and it is to follow these steps. So step number 1 is find out about your fees and your funding options. So that's obviously very important, knowing that you can afford the program that you'd like to go into, whether that's a PhD, an MSc by research, an MPhil, knowing about the fees that are associated to those programs. And then also the funding options. Are you going with a loan? Are you going with a scholarship? Are there studentships? Or are there any other options for you? Then once you've kind of gone with that, your next step will be to formulate a niche research idea. And when we say niche, you really have to come up with a very, very niche idea. You'll have to basically go from your very overarching topic all the way down to subtopic, then make that even more niche and just you're literally looking at the most particular thing within that research area. And you need to come up with a hypothesis for this. And it will need to cover the bridge that you're building for that knowledge gap that exists within your research field. Once you've come up with that niche research question, you can then begin the next step, which is finding your supervisor within that field. So for this step, you'll need to go onto our staff web pages, which is linked just below, and you'll need to search the word supervisor with the field that you're looking into. So for example, if your research sits within criminology and you're looking at crime rates within a specific, domestic abuse, for example, you would then search something like supervisor criminology, and it'll come up with all the supervisors who do something within criminology. If you want to be more specific and use maybe a word from your research question, you could do something like supervisor victimization, and it'll come with anybody who has done any kind of research within that field, but is also qualified to be a supervisor within that. So it's very important that they have an area of supervision on their portfolio. And then once you've found somebody that you think could be your supervisor, you will contact them and ask them if they have capacity to take you up as a PhD student, an MPhil student, MSc by research student, just to see if they have capacity and availability to take you on. And just to see if it's also appropriate for them to basically be your supervisor, but also find out whether or not they'd be happy to work with you on your project. Once all of that has been boxed away, they're happy, you're happy, and you've found that supervisor, your next step will be writing your research proposal with your supervisor. And it's very important that you do write it with them. They'll be able to tell you whether there's a specific word limit that you'll need to reach, formatting, all of those things. And the research proposal is so important because it forms part of your application. And then once you have completed that stage, you can move on to your final step, which is to submit your application on our portal. And I will go into a bit more detail on the research proposal as well as the application process later in this video. But yeah, to find your supervisor, do visit www.salford.ac.uk/our-staff. To give you an idea of the timelines, and do feel free to pause the video here, this will give you an idea of what an MPhil or an MSc by research looks like full-time versus part-time. And you can see the differences there. Your first year is where you'll be writing that 40,000 word thesis or 50,000 word thesis, depending on what type of degree you're going to look at. And then full-time second year is when you'll be doing your completion. And if you need a viva, you'll be doing a viva there, and you have your award of your degree within that year. And then part-time is 2 years plus 1 year completion. For PhD, you're looking at about 3 years plus 1 year completion if you're doing full-time, and it's about 100-word thesis. So that's what you're looking at there. Again, it does differ when you go part-time. Part-time, you're looking at about 6 years plus 1 year completion year. And then this is how it breaks out. Again, feel free to pause the video if you want to look at it in more detail. There are other routes into the doctoral degrees, which include the PhD by published works, which require roughly 5 to 7 pieces of published works as part of your application. They can be journals or books that you've written, and they do have to be submitted along with a supporting statement. The supporting statement in this case is similar to the research proposal for the traditional route, It does vary a little bit, but this is something that you will discuss with your supervisor. So you will need to still find yourself a supervisor, and then you'll be able to talk with them when you write that supporting statement as part of your application. And then prior to your registration as well, you'll be required to submit your application along with your prima facie report, and you'll need to pay about £500 for that, and that fee is to ascertain if your publications are appropriate. Another option that's available is the professional doctorate, also known as a DProf, which provides an excellent framework for developing a credible research proposal based on issues identified in a clinical or health-related environment. And this course has been developed in collaboration with the in-service professionals, so along the key themes of education, for example, for personal strategies and practice development, creative decision-making and risk-taking, developing presence, influence, and political know-how, and evidence-based practice and research. You will need to be in employment for this, and you can be a nurse, a midwife, a doctor, social worker, occupational therapist. The list does go on, and that's the areas that you would be in. So you will study part-time for this degree while you work, and you will have 2 supervisors to support your research. Moving on to the application process, you'll need to submit your application through the university's application portal, choosing one of the 3 entry points when you want to start your degree, so whether that's January, May, or September. You will also need to include 2 references in your application, a CV and covering letter, and then you will also need to include a personal statement. So the personal statement is going to be all about you, about your experience, about your qualities, your knowledge, all of that will be in the personal statement. So the personal statement is all about you and your passions, whereas the research proposal will be all about your research and what you're looking into. And I'll go into a bit more detail in that for the next slide. You'll also need to provide us with a transcript and certificates if you've already received this. If you're going to be graduating and you don't have your transcripts yet, that's fine. You can add these at a later date. Admissions will ask for that at a later point. And then if you're an international student, you will need to provide us with your passport and your IELTS. So your research proposal is going to be the most important part of your application. It is where you demonstrate to us how and why you've chosen to do this particular research project. It will need to include a working title, a general overview, a review of general literature, key research questions, your methodologies, your expected results, timescale, and references, and all of this does need to be worked on with your supervisor. There are a few key things to bear in mind, like make sure that your research proposal is accessible. Can you sum up your project in 1 sentence? Make sure your research proposal isn't too broad or too vague. And again, is it something appropriate for your supervisor? So this is where we really recommend working on this research proposal with your supervisor. So finding your supervisor first. And also just ensure that this is a topic that you find interesting. You're going to be working on it for a good few years. You want to make sure that you're enjoying the work that you're doing and you're staying motivated throughout your PhD. A very handy source is the website that I've linked on here, and it will be linked in the description as well, which is www.salford.ac.uk/guidance-on-writing-a-research-proposal. It gives you all the guidance that you need to write your research proposal. Thank you very much for watching, and do feel free to follow us on any of our socials.